Hi, and welcome back for part 2 of our DVD where we go over all of the tools. All the tools that you see listed here are tools that we will individually go over in much greater detail. And I would suggest now that you print out a copy of all the charts to make it easier to read and make notes. Unlike the presentation charts that we've covered in the earlier part of the DVD, some of the tools we have prepared for you are very detailed, and we'll cover the highlights of each one now. The very first tool is called Getting Started Checklist. Checklist is the first step on the path of your supplier management journey. In step 1, the journey begins with an external view as you identify and profile all your major suppliers. Then the focus moves internally. In step 2, you start by stepping back and looking at your company's organizational structure and identify all of the key internal stakeholders. We then move into the development of your supplier management infrastructure using the tools referenced in step 3. Step 4 is important and the final internal step as you successfully build your business case. Step 5 moves you back into the external view with one-on-one meetings with your suppliers. As you do, step 6 allows you to create an overview and evaluate each supplier. The process becomes even more interesting now as you move into step 7, in which you complete the data mapping and supplier integration opportunities. You may at this point want to go back to update your business case because you will have learned a great deal more than you did in the initial profile information. Finally, in step 8, you develop relationships and drive your supplier summits and workshops. The next tool that we will profile together is a supplier identification and profile tool. The first column in this tool separates HR into its typical functional areas. For each HR functional area, we have listed typical suppliers in the next column. For each supplier, we suggest you list name, whether the supplier uses any third parties to complete the work, the administrative service only fee, planned spend, number of employee touch points via either the phone, web, and also the total, contract expiration date, and whether you have good performance guarantees in place. This initial information will help you determine where you have gaps to fill and how to best prioritize your efforts, as you'll not be able to take all of this on at one time. That's just too overwhelming. But let's just get started. Also, don't be concerned that you have a lot of gaps. I don't know of anyone, and I mean anyone, who can fill all this in the first time. In the Supplier Management Roadmap tool, the vision and segments of the roadmap were covered in the presentation in part 1 of the DVD. You may remember we covered the top 5 elements at a very high level. This chart contains much greater detail for each segment comprising the roadmap. These details will help you think through what makes sense for your organization as you create your own roadmap. Thinking through these details will help you determine goals and objectives and a multi-year strategy to see your supplier management organization come to life. It'll also help you in making your business case to leadership. In the Role Definitions tool, this lists several different stakeholder roles in the left column that may exist in your company and/or that you may work with routinely. For each role, using the legend at the bottom, begin to think about involvement in each area that goes across the top row. You may consider doing this as a current state, then repeat as a future state. Another suggestion is to use this as a conversation device when you meet with each key stakeholder. I've always found this tool useful in determining how well aligned we may be to the key stakeholders. In the Supplier Management Accountability Matrix, this matrix goes much deeper than the Role Definition tool. Strategy and execution are added to the segments described in the Supplier Management Roadmap in the left column. For each segment of the process, activities are listed and you must determine who has the lead and also the support accountability. We're now building on the information from earlier tools and getting more clarity on the stakeholder roles for your company. Again, looking at this as current, then future state may be helpful to separate the two views. We prepared a sample HR supplier management job description as a tool. Your team may need resources to develop the accountabilities that fall to your team as agreed on with your key stakeholders. This job description will be a good start for thinking through the needs that exist for your company. Our next tool is a supplier overview and evaluation worksheet. This worksheet is a tool to help you organize and focus. Each area is self-explanatory, really, but don't feel like all the areas have to be completed, at least not right away. Take this step as you prepare for future one-on-one meetings with your suppliers. Some areas may not be filled out until you've completed several supplier meetings. The Data Exchange Mapping tool brings the yarn exercise that we discussed in the DVD to reality. For each data feed, identify the supplier that is sending data in the left column. Since a supplier may be sending more than one data feed, we've listed multiple items for you. Then look to your suppliers across the top row to identify which supplier is receiving the data feed. For each connection, describe what the focus of the data feed is all about. This exercise is very important in helping you identify where you might best target future supplier summits. This exercise also helps the employer begin to understand where it has or could have valuable employee touchpoints. With the supplier integration tool, it's really an exercise that begins with what your data identifies as your top chronic conditions. For each one, ask your supplier what they do, if anything. There are no wrong answers here, but you will quickly see where you have overlap among suppliers that can drive waste or result in poor communications with employees. If you have multiple suppliers for any chronic condition, which one has primary ownership? How is this related to the severity of the chronic condition? Are some key questions to ask yourselves. Completing a supplier summit guideline. This tool segments completing a supplier management summit, and for each segment provides details you may want to consider. The call-out box at the bottom is my quote to help our suppliers understand how important integration and cooperation is to our and their future success. The employee health scenario examples. These are sample employee health scenarios for you to consider discussing with your suppliers. You may remember us covering one very specifically towards the end of the DVD. As we near the end, we have a sample health plan performance guarantees. This tool provides 10 categories of performance guarantees. Specific performance guarantee areas are listed within each category. Applying the information at the lower right of the chart will help you prepare a performance guarantee for each specific area. This will entail a significant amount of work and require deep thought, but is well worth it as you will be able to reuse this type of information for other suppliers.